opinions and statements made by the host and participants in this program are not those of the owners, advertisers, and management company of Sugar City FM 90.3. Nor are such statements necessarily supported or endorsed by the owners, managers, or advertisers of the station. While we encourage all to share their opinions, we do not support any comments that may slander, discriminate, or otherwise offend anyone, and we insist that you refrain from any such statements.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar City 90.3 for Fear No Favor.
Where is one? Where is the cancer man who run out from out for war?
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to SugarCityFMSakeHits.com or download Simple Radio app on the Google Play Store. And join Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your call. Fear No Favor every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM.
And welcome to Fear No Favor with our General Surgeon, Dr. Natalie Osborne. We have been having quite some sessions, and based on the feedback that I've been getting from persons who would have listened, whether directly on the night of the direct delivery or via Facebook later on, we've been getting some great reviews, and I want to congratulate her on her wealth of knowledge and confidence in the field of surgery and medicine on a whole. I'm extremely proud of her, and I want to encourage her to continue to serve her country well. There will always be undulations in the performance of your duty, but your strength is for you to come from those valleys and go back to the plateau of that hill that you would have so ably established and proven. Tonight we're going to be talking about colorectal cancer. And let Dr. Osborne introduce herself.
Good night, everyone who is listening this evening, and thank you once again for having me here, Mr. Nital. It's a pleasure always to be here and to share some knowledge with our listening audience, and our objective is always that we leave here after the show is finished that we've learned something new and we've added to our knowledge. This evening we're going to be speaking about colorectal cancer. Many of us hear about Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but very few persons are aware that the month of March is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. So this is something we chose this topic specifically because it is this time of the year in this particular month of March that emphasis is being made on colorectal cancer and the impact that it has on our lives and the the devastation a disease like this can have on our families, in our society as well. And though many persons may not often think of colorectal cancer, it is very prevalent worldwide and in our small community of St. Kitts and Nevis. What exactly is colorectal cancer? We must know that it is a cancer of the colon, which is the large bowel, and the rectum. And we know that any cancer, usually when a cancer begins, it begins as cells that then begin to multiply. And in the colon, most of these cancers or lesions that go on to become cancerous starts as small polyps that begin anywhere in the colon. So as we said, the colon is a large part of the gastrointestinal tract. It is about 1.5 meters in length, and it are about 5 feet, and its main function is to reabsorb the water and to help form the stool. So we say colorectal cancer, so it's from the colon and the last portion there that is called the rectum.
Okay, but before we dig any deeper into this conversation, permit me to go off obliquely and wish you well on International Ladies' Day. I went to give a presentation at Washington Archibald High School to the female teachers, and I think that I wasn't too happy with the word Women's Day. I felt like a handle should have been given to that name, and I really dubbed it International Ladies' Day. Because when you do that, then you handle the females, you put a handle to the names of the females, and we make things happen. And it was all about embracing equity. So even though we are setting the stage for equal treatment cannot be equal if you do not work on the equity. You're giving somebody an opportunity, you must also provide them with the means of taking care of that opportunity in a maximum way. And I want to congratulate you because you started out some 14 years ago. You were in the company of our great surgeon, Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, and based on that experience and knowledge that you had, you were able now to be scheduled permanently and with confidence as one of our 2 general surgeons at our hospital. And knowing you from way back then in Keon High School, when I taught you chemistry, I'm feeling so proud of you, and I really want to wish you well in your continued quest for success, and I hope that you would have enjoyed the International Ladies' Day yesterday when it was held.
Yes, yes. I had a really good day. Thank you. And I would like to say I'm sure all of the women who are listening currently would be so happy to hear you, that you're wishing us well and celebrating. But just remember that we're women all year round, so we need to be celebrated and supported and encouraged throughout the entire year, although the emphasis is made on that day. But remember to support the women in your lives, your sisters, your mothers, your aunts, your friends, all year round, because we do need it. Women carry a lot on their shoulders, and oftentimes we're forced to be a lot of it in silence. So it's good to have the support of our men.
Okay, thank you very much. And most certainly I would be doing that. Now, Dr. Osborne, what is the cause of colon cancer?
Well, the cause of colon cancer, like most other cancers, you do not have a direct cause, or some of the cause, the direct cause is uncertain. But we know that usually healthy cells in the colon begin to have mutation in these cells, okay? And usually the cells have things that prevent the cells from mutating. But where there is a mutation in the gene, it stops certain actions of the cells. So for example, there are certain genes that will stop cells from multiplying abnormally. But when there is a mutation in that gene, it doesn't allow or doesn't create or cause apoptosis or destruction of the cells once it begins to grow abnormally. So usually it comes down to genetics. And healthy cells grow and divide. But sometimes when you have a cell and its DNA is damaged, it can become cancerous because that cell, as it is damaged, it continues to multiply, and there is nothing that puts a stop to it. So that damaged cell, as it continues to multiply, it can become a cancer. We know also that most cancers in the colon begin as a polyp. All right, and it starts usually as a polyp. That is why it's important to do your investigations of the colon so you can catch these polyps early and they are removed. It is said that most colorectal cancer takes about approximately 10 to 15 years from the start of the polyp formation till when it becomes a full-blown cancer. So that is why it is important to have your screening and your diagnostic colonoscopy so that you can catch any of these colonic polyps at an early stage where they can be removed.
So I'm sensing that cancer in general is just the uncontrolled replication of
the cells. Yes.
Okay. Very impressive and informative thus far. But how common is colorectal cancer?
We know that colorectal cancer, globally, annually is diagnosed in more than 1 million persons, okay? And about 500,000 deaths occur as a result of colorectal cancer. It is said to be the third most common cancer in the United States. It is the second most common cancer in women, and the third most common cancer is in men. And it's said to be more prevalent in the developed country over the developing countries because of dietary causes. You know, likely if you're in a developed country, it is easier for you to get some orange juice than to eat an orange, which is high in fiber, or to drink apple juice instead of eating an apple. So sometimes when we think that we would have progressed, we're actually doing more harm to ourselves. So those are the main reason, the prevalence of colorectal cancer. That's why we're speaking about it this evening.
But when you say globally greater than 1 million people get colorectal cancer, yearly?
Yearly, they are diagnosed yearly.
Yes,
they're diagnosed yearly.
Yearly. What are the risk factors associated with colon cancer?
Well, there are many risk factors associated with colorectal cancer. And many of them include, for example, advanced age. Usually it is said that colon cancer becomes more prevalent the older you are, more so above the age of 60. It is very important to know that. So most persons who develop colorectal cancer in their lifetime would be around above the age of 50, but most cases occur more than in the older patients between their 60s and 70s. It is also prevalent in the black race. Our community is predominantly black, and so that's why we would have a higher risk of colorectal cancer than the persons of a Caucasian descendant. If you've had a personal history of having colorectal cancer prior, or you may have had a history of having polyps, you're at an increased risk of developing colorectal cancer. And there are certain diseases, what we call inflammatory bowel disease. And of them, the most prevalent are ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. I'm sure many of our listening audience would have heard of these diseases. They affect the large bowel or the colon, the walls of it. And ulcerative colitis has a high incidence of going on to become colorectal cancer. For persons who are diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, they have an increased risk of developing colorectal cancer as well as Crohn's. But of the two, inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis has a greater risk of developing the patient going on to develop colorectal cancer. There are many persons too who may have a family history of colorectal cancer, which increases their risk. If you have a first-degree relative who has colorectal cancer, for example, you or your mother or your sister or your child, so those are your first-degree relative. If you have 2 or more first-degree relative with colorectal cancer, you're at a much increased risk of developing colorectal cancer. And there are also some hereditary genetic syndromes that increases your risk of developing colorectal cancer. And the most common of them is what we call the FAP, or familial adenomatous polyposis coli syndrome, or the hereditary non-polyposis colorectal cancer. And these two syndromes, although they're rare and they occur in less than 5% of the population. If these persons have these genetic mutations, they have a high likelihood of going on to develop colorectal cancer. And especially with the familial adenomatous polyposis syndrome, 100% of these persons go on to develop colorectal cancer. Also, your diet has an influence in you developing colorectal cancer. If your diet is high in fats and low in fiber, you can go on to develop colorectal cancer. Why is this important to know? Because fiber acts like a broom in your colon. It pushes the waste material forward so it doesn't settle there and create havoc. Also, you want to keep an active lifestyle, because sedentary lifestyle increases your risk, and as well as persons who are obese. Oftentimes, with your obese or high body mass index, the persons are less active, and that sedentary lifestyle can increase your risk. And finally, you have things like smoking. You can always accuse or throw smoking as a risk factor for most cancers, along with things like alcohol.
Radiation therapy for cancer. That would be maybe along the cure or treatment program, radiation therapy directed at the abdomen. That would come under the treatment aspect of it.
No, well, it is also said that some radiation therapy for a cancer can also be a risk for developing another cancer as well.
Cancer. Okay, let us take a break and give the good doctor a chance to sip some water and mind her business.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar Soda 90.3 for Fear No Favor.
Where is man? Where is the cancer man? Don't run and come out for war.
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to sugarcityfmsankits.com or download Simple Radio app from the Google Play Store. And join Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your call. Fear No Favor. Every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM.
With our General Surgeon, Dr. Natalie Osborne. We're talking about colon cancer. Now I'd like to ask the good doctor, what are the common symptoms associated with colon cancer?
Okay. When we think of colorectal cancer, there are quite a few symptoms or signs that we speak about. One of the most prevalent one would be rectal bleed in the stool. If a person goes to the restroom and they realize when they defecate or use the toilet, they see blood in their stool, that is of concern. Because that is, most times it may not be a cancer, but because there are many causes that attributes to rectal bleed. But if you see rectal bleeding, it is an indication that you need to get it checked out. And one of the most prevalent associated symptom is rectal bleed. Another symptom can be weight loss. As with most different types of cancers, weight loss is usually associated with cancer. So, and then we have things like a change in bowel habit. What do I mean when I say change in bowel habit? If there are some persons who usually go to the restroom twice per day, 3 times per day, and that is their norm, or every morning. But you may realize that if you went twice per day, you start going once. So that is a change in your bowel habit. Some persons may also have diarrhea mixed with constipation. So one day they may have what is considered diarrhea. Another day they may have difficulty going off. So a change from your normal habit of going to the restroom, that is of concern. Another thing you can have is narrow stools. If you have a cancer that is located mostly on the left side of the colon, like in what we call the sigmoid colon, that's one of the latter parts of the colon, and that area is a little bit more narrowed, and if you have a tumor there, the stool can come out narrowed or pencil-like in appearance. You may also have a sensation that you feel like you never completely evacuate your bowels. So you have that sensation that you always want to go, or you feel like there is something still left there. So that is that feeling, we call that tenesmus. So you have that sensation that there's always something there and it's uncomfortable. You can also have some abdominal discomfort, abdominal pain, crampy abdominal pain. You can have some bloating as well too. And something that we call spurious diarrhea. What is spurious diarrhea? Spurious diarrhea is diarrhea or watery stool in the presence of an obstruction. As there is something that is obstructing the colon, and there is a backup of the fluid content in the colon, or the stool content, the liquid stool. As there is a distension, some of the stool bypass the obstructive lesion and it comes out as watery stool. So sometimes you can have bowel obstruction as a result of a tumor or the presence of a tumor that leads to you to have diarrhea or watery stool. So the 3 cardinal signs associated with colorectal cancer is, as we said, just to re-emphasize, the most important one that you have to keep in mind is rectal bleeding, or bleeding when your stool or blood coating the stool or blood mixed in with the stool. You may see that. You will have a change in bowel habit. You can have weight loss. And those are the 3 most common signs. Unexplained weight loss. You're not trying to lose weight, but you realize that your clothes is feeling a little bit looser on you than usual. And you said, something is wrong. I'm losing weight and I'm not even trying.
You spoke about the width of the stool. So it is much narrow, much more narrow. Is there the situation where you also have stool being delivered similar to that of a goat? Because sometimes they become small, drop. Whatever is happening there, they do not get a chance to accumulate and come out as a particular volume, but it could be like goat dropping sometimes.
Well, those stool material that comes out almost like droppings from a goat is usually as a result of the stool being hard or you're constipated, and the water, most of the water is reabsorbed because the function of the large bowel or the colon is to reabsorb the water. And if so much water is removed from the stool, then it becomes hard. And sometimes little by little some comes out, and it comes out in small pellets. But when we speak about colorectal cancer and narrow stools, it's usually where there is a cancer on the left side or close, there's in the region of the rectum, or there's a cancer in the sigmoid region, that latter part of the colon. Those cancers are usually circumferential or like a napkin ring. So it goes around the entire circumference of the colon. So the lumen or the opening in the colon is much narrowed. So when the stool passes, it is pencil-like or very narrowed. And that is more significant than having like small pellets per se.
I say that nausea, vomiting, and anemia. Would somebody become anemic due to colon cancer?
Yes, that person, oftentimes we may have patients who present with anemia for study. Why would you say that? These persons, they come in, they're exhausted, they're tired, they're short of breath, and they're wondering what is going on. So when you begin to work up these patients, you realize, oh, your blood count is low, hence you have anemia. And we said these persons present with iron deficiency anemia, and that would prompt you to study that person. Why would a person with colorectal cancer have anemia? Usually that's when the cancer or the tumor is on the right side of the colon. The right side of the colon consists of the cecum, the ascending colon, and by the hepatic flexure there and the first part of the transverse colon. And what happens if there's a tumor in those areas? The tumor bleeds, because most of these tumors, they're quite friable or they bleed quite easily. But the blood, it is dripping, and that blood is mixed in with the stool. So by the time it reached the rectum and the anus, it is so broken down, you do not see blood. But if you were to then test that stool, you may find that there's blood in it. So there is no blood perceived when the person go and defecate. But these persons, they keep losing the blood bit by bit, and over time they present with symptoms of anemia. They're short of breath, they're feeling weary, their face and body, their limbs begin to look puffy, they're pale. And then you say, what is going on? And then when you begin to do the investigation, you may then be led to find that this person have a colorectal cancer or cancer of the colon.
Yes, because you did indicate earlier that the passage of blood, and if you're losing blood, you can become anemic.
But on the left side, if there's a colon on the left side, that blood is overt. You see that is frank blood. But if it's more on the right side, further away from the rectum, you may not see frank blood. And that is why these persons present with anemia, but they never saw any frank blood in their stool. So once you see that they have the anemia, you're then concerned, why would this person have anemia? And if you're prompted to study this patient, as you should, you may then be led to make a diagnosis of colorectal cancer.
After carrying out the appropriate tests to confirm that. Could we take a break, acknowledge?
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar Soda 90.3 for Fear No Favor.
Where is the cancer man? No runner come out for war.
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to SugarCityFMSankits.com or download Simple Radio app from the Google Play Store. And join Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your call. Fear No Favor. Every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM.
Welcome back to Fear in Our Favor with our General Surgeon, Dr. Natalie Osborne. Now, Doc, how is colorectal cancer diagnosed?
Okay, for colorectal cancer and its diagnosis, usually, as we said earlier, several presentations ago, we usually take a good history to make a diagnosis. You discuss the patient, will tell you their symptoms that they present with. You can do a physical examination of this patient. You'll examine their abdomen, feel if there are any masses, look at their mucous membranes. You examine their eyes, see if it is pale. You're looking for signs of weight loss or wasting, and that will be part of your physical examination. And then you can do your diagnostic studies. Usually, you begin with your basic tests like your CBC and your basic metabolic panel, looking to see how their white blood cells are looking, if they have their hemoglobin or their blood count. That would indicate if this person may have anemia. You want to check on those things. Then you want to check their metabolic panel. That may let you to look at their kidney function, how that is doing. Look at their liver function to tell you if there is any abnormalities there, because that may help you to conclude or indicate if the person has a spread of the disease to the liver. If you find that your liver panel tests are abnormal as well too, you may want to do things like an X-ray to see, because as you are trying to diagnose, you're also working up the patient to help rule out or rule in certain things. You can also do things like a CT scan. You may want to do that if you're in a center where you have access to an MRI and ultrasound. You may do that. But for diagnosis of a colorectal cancer, the gold standard internationally is to have a colonoscopy and biopsy. What is that colonoscopy? That is a camera that is placed inside the rectum, and it's looking throughout the colon, going from the distal end of the colon to the most proximal end, and you're looking at the colon wall to see if there are any lesions there, any tumors, and if you see anything abnormal, then you can biopsy or take samples, and that would be sent to the lab to make or confirm your diagnosis. So if you do your colonoscopy, you can take tissue sample, and that would be that would assist with your diagnosis. Hence, your colonoscopy and biopsy is your gold standard.
We carry out these procedures here, the colonoscopy.
Of course, we do colonoscopy here. Yes.
When somebody hears about a camera is placed in a certain interior environment, how is it done? Because sometimes we say we try to avoid surgery, but yet we are talking about a camera being placed in a particular area. How is that actually done to achieve the output that we're looking for?
Okay, so when we say a camera, it's like a scope. We call it a colonoscope. It's like a flexible tube, a long tube, and at the end or the tip of the tube, there is a camera. So this is done. The patient is prepped for this procedure. Why they need a preparation? Because the colon has stool in it. And so if you're going to look inside the colon, you want to make sure it is void or emptied of all stools. So the day before, the patient is given a laxative or special liquid. They can drink that, and they evacuate their bowel. And during that period, they are fasting as well. They will not eat any solid food. They can drink liquids, clear fluids. And so on the day of the procedure, usually we give a sedative, so the person has what we call conscious sedation. They're not fully asleep, but they are given something to assist with the pain and the discomfort. And the scope or the flexible colonoscope is placed into the rectum. And as you're looking into the rectum, you're taking images. If you see anything that is abnormal, you can then take biopsy of that.
Excellent. It is important when you mention clearing the colon so that you could have good resolution. And I am told that sometimes when a male, somebody would have a high stomach, sometimes it's just pounds of feces that is building up in the colon. They showed a picture with a popular singer when he passed the show, the colon, and it had about 50 pounds feces inside there, trapped inside there. So I could understand what you would mean by, but if that is available, why persons are not using that? You mentioned the fiber and it's like a broom and everything else. Why persons would not make those conscious effort to ensure that you detox, so to speak, and get the colon and those spaces clear? Because it is said that most of your ailment starts in the gut area. Yeah, it is just interesting that I did some work on that, and it's sort of poundage that people would have in terms of feces trapped in the colon.
But that has a lot to do with each individual diet over the years. The persons who have a poor diet, a diet that is poor in fiber, persons who have not developed adequate how should I say, discipline in the or hygiene, in the bowel hygiene, because it's a discipline. You condition yourself. You can be conditioned to go to the restroom every day. Some persons go after every meal, and this is a conditioning so that your bowel can evacuate, or you can evacuate your bowel on a regular basis. So some persons create those poor habits. They're not drinking enough fluids. They're not eating foods rich in fiber, and that's the reason.
Okay. What are common colon cancer screening tests? What are some of the common ones?
So for us to speak about cancer screening of the colon, you must understand what it means to have a screening test. A screening test is any test that is used frequently to diagnose or make a diagnosis of a particular disease, usually before the disease occur, or to diagnose the disease in early stage. So for colorectal cancer, the most common screening test would be the colonoscopy. We already mentioned the colonoscopy. You can see directly into the colon, look at the mucosa or the most inner lining of the colon, and you can take images, take pictures. If you see a polyp or any abnormality, you can biopsy that or remove it and send it to be tested. But there are other tests that we use. There's certain tests where you can get a sample of stool and you test that. So you're looking most of the time for hidden blood in the stool. And one of the most prevalent one is what we call fecal immunochemical tests or FIT tests. So you get a sample. That sample is taken to the lab, and that it is tested for the presence of blood. Another test is that we call the guaiac-based fecal occult blood test. It is similar to the FIT test, but it also tests for the presence of blood in the stool. You can also do a fecal DNA test as well too. So this test looks for genetic mutation or blood product in your poop. And we have also a sigmoidoscopy or flexible sigmoidoscopy. It is similar to the colonoscopy, but it just goes up to the sigmoid portion of the colon, so it doesn't look at the entire colon. Why would you want to do that? That procedure can be done without any anesthesia. It's often done in a doctor's office, and also most of the colon cancer occurs in the sigmoid or the rectosigmoid region. So most of the colon cancer occur in that most distal portion. So you can get a sigmoidoscopy done, but to complete the test, the colonoscopy would be the best. There's also a virtual colonoscopy as well too, where you get what you call X-ray imaging of the colon, and you're looking at it. It's a special test. You're using a machine and you're getting special images of the colon, and you can look to see if there is any abnormality, any polyp. But if one is found on a virtual colonoscopy, you have to go with the traditional colonoscopy and remove the polyp if you see it.
You ever did have patients who might resist taking a particular procedure? Okay, you might have females will feel comfortable, whether with a male or female, carrying out the colonoscopy examination.
If your question is?
The males now, how do they feel with person, especially another male, trying to carry out that particular procedure on them?
I find that we don't really have a problem based on any gender in that situation, because if the patient needs one and it's done in the hospital setting, it's done under conditions where you're protecting the patient's dignity and making sure that the patient is comfortable. We usually do not have a problem with that. Most persons are usually somewhat apprehensive of doing any sort of procedure. Once you explain to the patients, which we usually do, the procedure and what it entails, patients are usually comfortable once they're given the correct information and they walk through what is expected or what they can expect.
But you still have a number of men who even refuse to go for prostate cancer.
Of course. They're always going to be the resistant patient.
Yes. They want to, they would like to find out, but they don't like the journey there. Yeah, they do not like the journey there. And I think it's through education.
Yes,
If people
yes.
understand how important it is for you to identify abnormal modification of cells and to ascertain one way or the other way it is. But do we normally have persons showing up late for these things?
Of course, because we will speak about it further, but we, in the medical world, you always or you usually recommend a colonoscopy from the age of 50 in the general population as a screening. If you have a family or first-degree relative who would have had colorectal cancer, it is indicative or it is advised that you take you have a colonoscopy done 10 years before that individual. For example, if your dad was diagnosed with colorectal cancer at the age 45, you're advised to have your first screening colonoscopy at age 35. So we do try and encourage patients to come and do them. But
You see, the issue with that, the bottleneck with that, is that even family members, at times, they might not be aware of the family history in regard to certain things, because people like to keep the ailment
private.
very private. So something you don't know whether you're going or coming with respect to trying to assist a patient. You might say anybody in your family had this or had this, and yeah, I'm sure
Oftentimes, patients you would ask a patient, "What did are your parents alive?" They say, "No." How did they die, or what was the cause of their death? Oftentimes, they say, "Oh, she died of a cancer," and they cannot specify because, as you said, persons are quite private, and some may not want others to know what their disease is. But we also do get quite a bit of cases in advanced stage of the disease, because patients would have avoided or not have the necessary information and would not have come forth and gotten their screening studies done. So by the time they come, the disease is pretty advanced.
And that is why programs of this nature, and I really like to thank you for this, you can open the eyes of persons out there. Because it is informative and it's instructive as well. And if you could get to identify symptoms, then you could say, well, she mentioned something a while ago, and she mentioned something, and when they put them together, it seems as if she's on the way just speaking to me. So it might prompt somebody now to get into action and go and check out themselves.
That ultimately is the goal of doing these presentations, because we both had busy days today, and it's a sacrifice that we make to come here so that we can ensure that no one can say they never heard it. That is our ultimate goal, that the people who are listening to us, they would tell someone and inform their friends and family, "Hey, I heard that you had rectal bleed," or "I realized that you're having difficulty when you go to the bathroom and defecating. I think you need to check this out. Hey, Dad, you're 60, you've never had a colonoscopy. Maybe you need to get this checked out." So ultimately, we want to make sure that the information gets out there and persons are encouraged to do their screening studies.
Act upon it. Act upon it. And we could advise people, if you do not get it now, you can always go to our Facebook and look at Fear in Our Favor, Newrish Nital with Dr. Natalie Osborne, colorectomy cancer.
Colorectal cancer.
Right.
Colorectal cancer.
And do what you have to do and get the information and spread it, spread the gospel. Right? How do healthcare providers stage colon cancer?
Okay, well, colon cancer is staged by a system that is used internationally that's called the TNM system. So T as in Tom, N as in Nancy, and M as in Mom. So the T would mean tumor. The tumor, the size of the tumor, how much the tumor has penetrated into the colon wall, the degree of penetration to the 4 layers of the colon wall. So you have the mucosa, the submucosa, the muscularis or muscular layer, and the most outer layer is called the serosa. So the degree of penetration. N would mean the nodes, how many nodes are affected. If there are any nodes affected, you can say there are 0 nodes, there are 1 node, 2 nodes, 3 nodes affected. And M means metastasis. Has the tumor spread beyond the colon or beyond the site of origin to another or distant organ? So that is where we call it TNM. And most the colorectal cancer is staged from stage 0 to 4. And it's quite a tedious staging system, but just so that you understand, stage 0 would mean the cancer is still on the innermost layer of the mucosa, that is carcinoma in situ. And if you were to diagnose the disease at that stage, that would have the best prognosis because you diagnose it pretty early. If you have stage 1, the cancer has pushed beyond the mucosa, gone into the muscular layer, but has not penetrated through the muscular layer. Stage 3 would be that it goes through the muscular layer, goes to the most outer layer there, or the serosa. That would be stage 2. Stage 3 would be that it infiltrated some of the lymph nodes to various degree, and stage 4, it would have spread to distant organs. So that would give your doctor an idea. But each stage has subset to that stage as well. But that is more for detail. That detail is more for your oncologist and the surgeon as they're staging the disease. So to have an idea is that the earlier or the lower the stage is, the better the prognosis. So if you were to have a diagnosis of colorectal cancer in stage 0 or 1, you have a much better prognosis or much better outcome than if you are diagnosed with stage 3 or stage 4 cancer. And anytime you hear that a cancer is in stage 4, you know that it has spread to a distal organ. So that is just an idea. So it goes from stage 0 to stage 4. The lower in number the stages, the better the prognosis or the less severe the disease has become. And as it gets to stage 3 and stage 4, it means that the disease is pretty advanced.
You have cells that are specific, right? Different parts of our body, different part of our makeup. So if a cell is specific to region A, and even though it might spread to region B, could it really continue to grow and develop in region B? Like when you said that the cancer would have spread to other organs. Is it so simple that a particular type of cell that is multiplying out of control to find a habitat within a different area of our body and continue?
Yes, because with these cancers, there are different vias by which they spread. Some spread through the blood, some spread via the lymphatic system, and that is where the cancer cells would get from the colon into for example, the liver, because the blood supply from the colon goes from the colon back to the liver. And oftentimes, by that, it goes through the portal system, goes to the liver, and then you have the cells or the cancer cell deposit inside of the liver. And also, the lymphatic system takes from the cancer cells from the place of origin in the colon to the lymphatic system, through the lymph nodes and their ducts, and it takes it to different organs.
Okay, let us take a break and come back.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar City 90.3 for Fear No Favor.
Where is one? Where is the dancer man? No runner come out for war.
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to SugarCityFMSakeits.com or download Simple Radio app on the Google Play Store. Enjoy Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your call. Fear nor favor. Every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM.
Welcome back to Fear in Our Favor with our General Surgeon, Dr. Natalie Osborne. Now, Doc, how do healthcare providers treat colon cancer?
Okay. Surgery is one of the most common treatment for colorectal cancer, but there are different types of procedures that we can do or surgeries that we can do. One of the most common thing that we can do, and we do that via the colonoscopy, you can do a polypectomy. Polypectomy comes from the root word polyp. And we learned earlier in the discussion that most cancer, almost all cancer, starts as a polyp, which is an abnormal growth there inside of the colon on the mucosal wall. So it usually starts with a polyp. So once a colonoscopy is done and you see a polyp, you can remove that polyp. So once you do that, that polyp can be tested by the pathologist. So in that instance, you can use the surgery to remove cancerous polyp and prevent the patient from going on to form or develop cancer. Most of the polyps that become cancerous are what we call adenomas or adenomatous polyps. So those are the most common types of polyps that go on to develop cancer or to form cancer. So once you do a polypectomy, you remove that and you eliminate that risk of the patient going on to have cancer. You can also do a partial resection or a partial colectomy of the colon. So if you have a colon cancer on the right side, you can do a right hemicolectomy where you remove most of the colon from the right side and you reattach it. Or if you have a cancer on the left side, you can do a left hemicolectomy. Once you prepare the patient, you take them to the operating room and you resect that section of the colon that is affected by the colon cancer. Mostly for rectal cancer, we can also do radiation therapy or radiofrequency ablation. You can do that. And those are most of the surgical treatment. If a patient comes in with advanced colorectal cancer and they're obstructed, where the stool is not passing at all, and the person presents with vomiting, their tummy is bloated or distended, and they have to have an emergency surgery and the bowel is not prepared, this person might end up with what we call a colostomy, where the colon is brought on the abdominal wall and the stool is collected via a bag or a colostomy bag on the abdominal wall. I'm sure many of our listeners might have seen someone or heard of someone who had a colostomy, where the stool empties out on the abdominal wall. And we would hope that our patient doesn't present in that late stage where they have to have a colostomy. So the most common surgical procedures would be to remove a polyp in the early stage or to resect the colon segment. There are other ways of treating colorectal cancer. If the person then have their surgical resection, they can go on to have chemotherapy or radiation therapy or targeted therapy. Okay? And that is usually when the patient is first seen by the general surgeon or the colorectal surgeon. After they have their surgery, then they are then transferred to the care of the oncologist to continue chemotherapy or radiation therapy or whatever other targeted therapy.
When that bag goes outside of the body, is it permanent or is it intermediate procedure for you to come back later and have the situation better adjust and maybe give back the person the normal use and remove that bag usage?
The permanency of the bag, it's dependent, case by case, is dependent on the diagnosis, because there sometimes are some benign or non-cancerous conditions where you have to have a colostomy. Then after the process is contained or resolved, then you can go back in and close the colostomy, meaning removing the bowel from its attachment to the abdominal wall and reattach it inside. Also with colon cancer, yes, the person may have that opportunity as well, because after they have their treatment, the initial treatment with chemotherapy, etc., once the condition is controlled or the situation is resolved, you can go back in and reattach or put back together the bowel, which we call anastomosis. But oftentimes as well, too, if the person presented with an advanced disease, they can have the colostomy be permanent. So it has to be case dependent.
And it's possible that if you didn't get a chance to do that in time, you're going to actually have feces coming through someone's mouth, going in the opposite direction.
Well, not if, okay. Well, we call it. You could have what we call a feculent discharge, but I don't really want to say feces coming through, because usually the feces. What would happen in that instance? Sometimes the content in the small bowels, before it goes into the large bowel, because feces is the content in the large bowel. That's the end part. If there is an obstruction, and the content in the small bowel, the liquid content, is settled there, it becomes stagnant, and it can develop and grow bacteria. And that is what gives you like a feculent vomitus or feculent discharge from the mouth. Usually, so we do not want to call it feces per se. I don't want to have our audience thinking that they're stooling via the mouth. Not like that.
Okay, what lifestyle changes can one make to reduce the risk of or prevent colon cancer?
Earlier, we spoke about the risk factors associated with colorectal cancer. Some of these risk factors, we said, were modifiable, and some are non-modifiable. What do we mean by them? The modifiable ones are the things that we can do something about, so we can take control of those. And the non-modifiable are the risk factors or the condition that is outside of us. So we do not have any control of aging, so we can't change that. We do not have any control of our age as a risk factor. We cannot change that. We cannot change our family history of having any kind of genetic mutation. But the stuff or the conditions that are modifiable that we can control, I'm encouraging each one of us that we take we learn from this and we put some of these things into practice. So we can do quite a lot in our day-to-day life. We can eat a variety of fruits and vegetables and whole grains. We remember that we said earlier that a risk factor for colorectal cancer is a diet that is poor or low in fresh fruits and vegetables and low in fiber. So these persons who would be at greater risk are persons who eat a lot of red meat. They eat a diet that is high in starchy foods and very poor in fruits and vegetables. We want to do the reverse. We want to have a diet that is rich in color, filled with fruits and vegetables and whole grain. We also want to avoid consuming quite a bit of alcohol. It is recommended that a woman have about 1 to 2 glass of alcohol beverage, usually some wine, if you want per day.
Per week, per day?
No more than 1 or 2 glass. And they say, okay, for a woman, 1 glass, and for a man, no more than 2 glasses daily. Oftentimes, when a person gets to drinking, typically they're drinking more than 1 glass. So if you want, the best advice with that, you drink occasionally or socially. Okay?
And about the gateway impact. Gateway, where you start small and then you end up being an alcoholic, just like people who start out on cigarette, they start to smoke weed and they start to take crack, heroin. So
we want to encourage them not to do that. That's the whole idea. So because we know that drinking alcohol is a risk factor, so we want to avoid that. If you smoke, as you spoke about cigarettes, we said that smoking is a risk factor for developing colon cancer. You want to stop smoking, because even if you stop smoking, you've been smoking for many years and you stop smoking, your chances or your risk decreases significantly. And you want to have an active lifestyle. You want to encourage exercise most days of the week. If you cannot do it every day, because sometimes because your work would not permit you, you want to get at least 3 days per week. You want to work out for at least 30 to 45 minutes. It doesn't have to be anything intense. You do not have to go into a gym and lift 100-pound weights. If you can walk, that is always important. If you can hike, if you can ride your bicycle, once you stay active, that would help. Because you want to maintain a healthy weight.
I can recall seeing you in the gym several years back. Do you still attend the gym?
Yes, I do still attend the gym.
Okay. But with the alcohol consumption though, I know our bodies, we take in starch, sugars, and they would ferment to form alcohol and carbon dioxide. Isn't that in itself sufficient of an alcohol concentration for you to not have to consume outside alcohol? I have never consumed alcohol, not even wine,
Okay.
because I'm quite aware that my body makes alcohol via the method of fermentation. You have sugars and starch that you can ferment.
Yes, and that those are important for the different biological or chemical cycles that occur. You remember the Krebs cycle?
Krebs cycle, yes. The Krebs
That is
cycle.
important. So yes, our body produces everything naturally what it needs to keep running at a cellular level. So you don't want to add too much more external alcohol or consume it. Yeah, that would create more havoc.
I want to ask a kind of awkward. What is a healthy weight? Where do you feel it? If you start to feel it in your joints, you start to look. Is it a look or a feel? What is a healthy weight?
Well, a healthy weight would be trying to keep your BMI within a normal range. We talk about the body mass index. There's a specific table towards that calculates your height. That goes with your height. Some of it take into consideration your age as well. But you want to take your weight with your height, and you calculate that and see how much a person should weigh, ideally, But you want to make sure that no one is going to fit into that mold perfectly, because different races tend to have different constitution. But you want to adhere to that as much as possible to ensure that your body stays within a normal weight.
If someone has to pay for a colon cancer screening, what is the cost of that? Do you shop? Do you make an appointment to have a colon cancer screening?
Well, yes.
Or as a result of getting sick, the doctor might indicate, well, let us do this procedure.
No, when we speak about screening, it means going and getting tested before the disease is diagnosed, essentially. So a screening, we spoke about the different screening modalities. We spoke about the FIT, where you can do, and the fecal occult blood testing, the screening colonoscopy. So you go and see your doctor. The doctor can order these, some of these tests, or refer you to get the endoscopy done. And then, of course, when you go to see the person who's doing the endoscopy, then you'll discuss that, whatever cost the person, each individual may want to ask for. So that's on a personal level.
What are the survival rates for colon cancer?
Okay. It says that the data shows that overall, about 65% of persons with colorectal cancer, they live about 65% of persons live 5 years after they are diagnosed. But you want to take into consideration the stage. Remember, we spoke about the stage earlier. So, for example, if you have 73% of colorectal cancer, if it is diagnosed in stage 4, where the disease has spread, within 5 years' time, about only 17% of them would be alive. So it depends. The survival rate is estimated based on the outcome. So how long people live after the treatment for a specific type of cancer and the stage. The better the outcome or the better the survival rate depends on the stage of the cancer. If you're in stage 0 or stage 1, you have more than a 90% chance of being alive 5 years after. If you're in stage 2, it may be dropped down to 80+%. If you're in stage 3, it may drop down to about 40 or 50%. When you get to stage 4, it drops off significantly. So the survival rate is usually calculated in 5-year time, looking at the overall outcome of the disease based on the stage in which it is diagnosed.
Surgeon, doctors usually give up on cancer patients. Is it possible for a doctor to reach a stage where, look, I'm not going to put any more resources into this particular patient because death is inevitable? Would a doctor entertain such thought?
Well,
Meaning that if there's a supreme being above, of which nothing greater can be perceived, and things can happen. I was talking to a gentleman, and he told me that he has just recovered from stage 4 cancer, and he's bouncing around. He could make a good football. He's bouncing around nicely. So, is it sometime that we give up on a patient when they reach a certain stage? Do we say, well, we're not going any further with this, we just accept that death is inevitable? Is that a mindset sometimes of doctors?
Well, it's not so much just a mindset of the doctors. Remember, when you're dealing with medicine, science, and family, it's a multifactorial thing that you're looking at. What we usually do is present the case to the patient and their family. Tell them, give them the necessary information from the studies that we've concluded that, for example, you have stage 3. I'm just giving you an example. Then you lay out all the cards to the individual and you tell them these are the options. Then you allow the family to decide. There are instances once you would have explained to the family, oh, this is stage 4. For example, the patient may have metastatic disease, spread to the liver, spread to the bone, and you explain to them the options and you give them the scenarios of the survival rates and stuff. Then you allow the family to make the decision. Are you going to pursue further studies? Sometimes patients will say, no, at this point, I just want to be comfortable. Some patients may choose not to have chemotherapy because they may think that it is not worth, I think, the expense, or sometimes the chemotherapy can be so toxic to the body. Some persons may not want to spend the next few months going through such such excruciating pain and weakness and vomits and all the side effects that come with these chemotherapy treatment. So we do not ultimately make the decision for the family. We give them the options and they then make the decision. Oftentimes patients are limited based on their resources. Healthcare is extremely expensive. So even though you would want to do good, we are limited here as well in the federation because we do not have access to all of these different treatment modalities. And so we present to the patient the options if they want to seek medical attention over abroad. And sometimes it may not be within their, it may not be attainable based on their financial resources.
You think somebody's life should just have a value like that? We put a value on a person's life, saying where they can afford to move on to, let us suppose it's up to stage 10, that we can go up to level 10. And here on St. Kitts, we can only go up to level 7. There are still 3 more stages we can move vertically upward. But we have exhausted what we have here. Who would decide that, look, should this person be encouraged to go to the next 8, 9, 10 level? I don't believe a value should be placed on somebody's life because they just cannot afford. I think it is the country's interest to ensure that everybody is given an opportunity to exhaust the maximum treatment that they can get. And maybe when you finish responding to that, I would like to ask you, how close are we to taking our patient treatment to the highest level that they can go? Are we still lagging behind by a few 30%, 20%, 10%?
We are going to lag behind because we are still a developing country and we do not have all of the resources available as a first world country. That is a fact. We may not be able to do anything about this for many years to come. So everything comes down to resource. We are not saying a life is less valuable than the other, but because of the limitation in resources here in the Federation, and you encourage a family, you can seek medical attention abroad, but that family may also have financial limitation that does not allow them to go to another region or neighboring island. That does not mean we do not value the family life, but just it is what it is. There's sometimes lack of resources. And that's the reality of it.
Sometimes resources could be equipment or medication, or it could also be the expertise.
Correct.
What are we doing to increase the expertise in as many areas as possible? Are we doing anything to get increase in numbers of expertise, especially people who are suffering from various types of cancer?
Of course. 10 years ago, we didn't have oncology in the Federation. We now have an oncology department. We've come a long way. We have 2 oncologists in the Federation. We didn't have any of that option 10, 15 years ago. Our patients always had to travel abroad for chemotherapy. Now we offer that in the Federation. So we've come a long way. We've got a long way to go, and we know we are limited in the resources. But we're not giving up. That doesn't mean we're going to give up. The next 10 years from now, we should be in a better place than where we are. But it does need everybody to come together as well, too. Collectively as a body, the government, the persons on the ground, the physicians as well. It's not going to be solved by any one individual, even the patients and the persons in the community, to support the institution, support the staff, so that we can keep moving upward. But we will continue to have some limitations because we are a developing country and we're a very small nation.
I think the previous administration would have taken steps to reduce oncology care. I have a member of my family who got a bill for $104,000 in her quest to not have her cancer advanced. $104,000. I think it was reduced to, after the reduction, you have 50%, there's 50% that dialysis going down. I wonder if it is time for us maybe to introduce some method of small taxation to offset the expenses of those who might not just be in a possible position to do that. $104,000 after getting was stage 2, 2 plus. I mean, could you imagine if you had gone on to 3, 4? I think that was extremely high. I spoke about it on my wager program already. And I think that we need to start putting in a little bit more, regardless of how we get it done. We need to look into the taking care of our people when they go to the hospital at a much cheaper rate. A much, much cheaper rate. $104,000, that's a lot of money to leave the hospital with in the form of a bill. Yes, it was paid. And maybe this is an opportunity for those in authority to push the national insurance, have it expedited, that persons can feel more comfortable, that instead of saying they don't want to put all this weight on their family members, they prefer to leave it for the children and grandchildren. That could be of assistance and give them the little hope that they should go on a little bit more. Sorry, that question might not have been most appropriate for you, but we just have to look at healthcare. We have to look at healthcare. What question should a person ask his or her doctor?
Okay, so if you're diagnosed with colon cancer or colorectal cancer and you want to know more about your disease, there may be some of the questions that you can ask. They're as follow. What kind of colon cancer do I have? Most colon cancer are what we call adenocarcinoma of the colon, more than 90%. So you want to know what type of cancer you have. Most are adenocarcinoma. You may have some, in rare cases, a sarcoma, a lymphoma in the colon, but most of them are adenocarcinoma. You can ask them what is a treatment going to be like with this cancer? Does it have a cure? You may want to ask specifically, what is the stage? That is very important because the stage of the disease will indicate what type of treatment you will need and how much treatment you would need, okay? And the cost would come into play there as well too. And you may want to know what are the most effective colon cancer treatment because you have different lines of treatment. You may have a first line treatment, a second line treatment, and it depends sometimes. Yet we go back to resources. You may want to give the first line, but maybe the individual or we have certain limitation of accessing some of the first line treatment. So you want to know these things. You want to know if you're going to need surgery, what kind of surgery that you would need, okay? And how long you would stay in the hospital after treatment and things like that you may want to know. You would want to know if you're going to have a colostomy based on the type of cancer and the location of the cancer. If you have a cancer that is way close to the opening of the anus, just entering into the rectum, you may end up with a colostomy because you may have to resect that section and you may have to have a permanent colostomy where the stool comes out to the colon, onto the abdominal wall in a bag. You will want to know what are all the types and different kinds of treatment for colon cancer, and you may want to know what are some of the side effects. Some of our patients may be interested in entering into clinical trials as well. Sometimes you can go there and get into a clinical trial where it is free and you do not have to pay for that one, okay? And some persons are concerned if their cancer is going to come back. So you want to ask the doctor, does this cancer have a chance to come back? And you will have that discussion with your physician, okay? If you can't stop the cancer, some patients, if they're in a very advanced stage 4 cancer, you may want to know what kind of treatment can I have? Can I still do something to even prolong my life, although I cannot be cured? That is what we call palliative treatment.
Let us take a break and come back.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar City 90.3 for Fear No Favor.
Where is the cancer man who wanna come out for war?
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial Log on to SugarCityFMSakeHits.com or download Simple Radio app on the Google Play Store. And join Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your calls. Fear nor favor. Every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM.
Welcome back to Fear Nor Favor. And we're having quite an informative and instructive session here tonight with Dr. Natalie Osborne, one of our two general surgeons of the hospital. We're very proud to have her here with us once more. Now, the patient has been treated for colon cancer. What about follow-ups?
Okay, after you've gotten your treatment, for example, you started with your surgery, there are several different things you would need to get done. So for the following 2 years, you're going to have a series of studies. They may include having a chest x-ray done, repeating your labs to see certain things, to see if your blood count is doing well, to see what your liver panel is looking like. The specific markers that we have also that are associated with colorectal cancer. One of the most specific one is called CEA, carcinoembryonic antigen, CEA. And that marker, you usually, if a person is diagnosed with colorectal cancer, you check your CEA levels and you see where it is. And after they've been treated or have their colon resection, you want to recheck it. And if the cancer has been taken care of, the levels should go down to 0. And periodically, you want to check your CEA levels, because if your CE levels begin to increase again, it may tell you a couple of things. Has the tumor returned? Was the tumor poorly resected? Or is it tumor, do you have an advanced stage of the disease? So this is what a tumor marker would do. It would help you to do like a surveillance or watching the disease, see how it is going along. So you want to do tests like that. You would want to get your yearly colonoscopy. After you were diagnosed with colorectal cancer and you had your surgery, the first year, 1 year after, you get a colonoscopy. Then you can do another colonoscopy the following 2 years, and the next 2 years, you want to get successive studies just to ensure that you do not have a recurrence or you do not have a second tumor. So these are tests you want to keep doing. You could also do the stool testing as we spoke about earlier. Okay, the FIT one, the FIT, or fecal immunochemical testing, or your fecal occult blood testing. You want to check if there's blood in the stool. So you can do some of these tests. And you keep a close eye on these patients doing your screening test or your surveillance test, usually up to the next 5 years, very closely to check as well of how the person is doing, because that speaks to the survival rate of the patient.
So the higher the stage,
Yes.
is the more frequent you'll have to have follow-ups. Like between 0 and 1, you might follow up
Yes.
a year or 2 years later.
You want to keep a closer eye, especially further along or the higher the stages, because you have a higher risk of maybe the patient coming back with metastasis. And if you can detect those metastases pretty early, you can go on and probably and treat those metastases.
Is cancer ever really cured, or it is controlled to the extent that the rate at which it is going now could be considered negligible?
No, people do get cured of their cancer. Some person, yes, you're cured. You can have breast cancer and be cured of your breast cancer because it was acted upon quickly. You had the correct and appropriate treatment. Yes, you can be cured. Some persons go on to live a full life and never have a problem again.
So when you say cancer came back, what are they actually saying? Because it was never cured, or it was just controlled to a certain extent?
Yes, sometimes it's controlled. Sometimes at that point you may have had some treatment, had some level of success. You did not see any in your follow-up tests. You didn't see any sign of the tumor or any signs of any spread. And then months later or years later, the person may then say, oh, it has come back. Also, but maybe never. In that instant, the cancer had never really left, because depending on the stage in which the person was diagnosed or the type of cancer. Some cancer progress much slower than others too.
You could have a relapse.
You could have a relapse. Mm-hmm.
Why and when would someone need a colonoscopy?
Okay, why and when someone would need a colonoscopy? Very good question. And if you do not remember anything else, this is the one section we want you to keep an eye on. Why and when someone would need a colonoscopy. We spoke earlier about the signs and symptoms. You would need a colonoscopy if you have rectal bleed, you have unexplained weight loss, you may have a change in your bowel habit, or you have an anemia and you cannot explain why. Symptomatic anemia, this person who's short of breath, weak, they're pale, and you can do that for a workup. So if you have any signs or symptoms, that is one of the most important indications for colonoscopy. You can also do a screening colonoscopy. We spoke earlier of having a screening colonoscopy done at the age of 50. That should be standard for us here in the Federation, because it's an international standard. So we want to encourage any and everyone wants to get to the age of 50 just to have a screening colonoscopy. You can avoid having developing colorectal cancer. If you have your colonoscopy, you see any polyps, abnormal polyps, they're removed, you're then free of having early colon cancer. You also, if you have any family members who were diagnosed with colon cancer, you're encouraged to get your screening colonoscopy 10 years prior to when that person was diagnosed. And the colonoscopy is important to make sure you're looking for any polyps. Someone might have gone and gotten a colonoscopy in 2021, found that they had some polyps. Those polyps were removed. You're encouraged to have repeated colonoscopies, so to just make sure you're doing the surveillance just to ensure that you do not miss any of these polyps, okay? And it can also be therapeutic. It's not just diagnostic. Sometimes we do colonoscopies as we remove the polyps as well, or there might be a bleeding. You can cauterize the bleeding or control a bleeding. You can put a clip on. So there are different reasons. It's not only diagnostic, it can also be used to treat some problems inside of the colon.
Okay, let us take a break and come back.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar City 90.3 for Fear No Favor.
Where is the cancer man who rather come out for war?
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to SugarCityFMSakeits.com or download Simple Radio app on the Google Play Store. And join Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your calls. Fear nor favor. Every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM.
Welcome back to Fear Nor Favor with our General Surgeon, Dr. Natalie Osborne. Now, Doc, could you give us some statistics with respect to colorectal cancer diagnosis in the Federation between 2012 2022?
Okay, we actually did this research recently. So we went back and looked at all of the cases that we would have diagnosed with colonoscopies in the last, I would say, 11 years, from 2012 to 2022. And we had a total number of 81 cases. And I specify with colonoscopy and biopsy, because of course there were patients who presented in advanced cases. They weren't able to have a colonoscopy. Some of them may have passed away. We've had patients who had symptoms and had diagnosis in other countries outside of the Federation. So these are the statistics that we were able to get here locally from our local pathologists. So we saw that there was a total of 81 cases where it was broken down. There were 36 males and 45 females with colorectal cancer. International standards, or internationally, it is usually the reverse. But our study here, with the 81 cases, most of our cases were females, as compared with internationally, where it's usually a ratio of 1.5 in favor of the males to 1 in females. So colorectal cancer is usually seen mostly in male. But I would wonder what could have been the reason here. Oftentimes, our males do not present for these studies as well, too, to get their workup. And sometimes our women, of course, normally outlive the male counterpart. They present more frequently for studies. So, and more of our patients who would have had advanced cases and were hence not diagnosed through colonoscopy might have likely been our males.
Okay, you have the age group. Could you break down the statistics with respect to age group for us?
Okay, certainly. So we broke it down in tens. We had 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 59, 60 to 69, 70 to 79, and 80 to 89. And in keeping with international research and the statistics, we saw that most of our patients with colorectal cancer are diagnosed above the age of 50. We over 70% of the total were diagnosed over the age of 50, and the more prevalent ages were between 60 and 69, where there were 25 cases, followed by 50 to 59. That is keeping with what is seen, because we've established that colorectal cancer is seen mostly in advanced ages. However, though, recent studies have been alluding to the fact that it's being diagnosed more in younger and younger patients. So we're seeing that as well too. We had about 3 patients within that age group of 30 to 39 diagnosed with colorectal cancer. Okay.
We ever did have anything younger than 30 Or would it have been considered a statistical outlier where just abnormal statistics?
Well, I particularly remember early in my career here, we had a patient who was 25 and he had what we call multiple polyposis coli. His colon was filled with polyps, leading us to believe that he had one of those genetic hereditary syndromes like familial adenomatous polyposis. Remember we spoke about those syndromes that they are rare and they represent at least approximately 5% of colorectal cancer. And once these persons are diagnosed with colorectal cancer, 100% go on to have with these polyps, 100% go on to develop colon cancer by the age of 40. So I remember this individual, young guy, was around 25. He developed a colorectal cancer. He presented to us with weight loss. He had rectal bleed. When we did the colonoscopy, he had multiple, hundreds of polyps seen throughout the colon, and we saw the tumor. We biopsied it, and it came back positive for adenocarcinoma. And I think he had traveled abroad to seek treatment, but ultimately he passed away. So we have seen cases in young ages.
Okay, I know you had a very long day in the operating theater, and I know that calls for a lot of concentration. I usually tell people that the brain uses more energy than any other part of the body. I say you can go and cut down cane field in 2 hours, and I stay here and study intensely for 2 hours. I'll be more tired than you. Yeah, that is science. And I what would you say to persons out there if you want to leave something of great substance and some way? What would you say to persons out there with respect to screening, yes, and everything?
Once we have a disease, I would like to summarize by saying that if we have a disease that we can do screening and early detection, it is always good to know. We've got several of those diseases, for example, prostate cancer, breast cancer, colorectal cancer is one of them. And we've got to take advantage of these screening methods that we have, because we have many diseases that we cannot screen for. And once they're detected, usually they're detected in advanced stages. So with a disease like colorectal cancer, we have available in the Federation the possibility of getting your screening colonoscopy. So my takeaway would be, my last word to encourage the audience would be, if they present with any symptoms that be highly suspicious for colorectal cancer, they're encouraged to go see their physician and get a screening colonoscopy, because that can actually save lives, because early detection can lead to early cure and a better 5-year survival rate.
Yes, and we have come to the end of this segment with our good doctor. And we want to have a conscience and not have exhausted anymore. Usually we want a session of this nature to be about an hour and 15 minutes. We have gone down to an hour and 37 minutes. And I think it is only fair that we take a station break and allow the good doctor to go and gather her energies back together and have a good night's rest to carry out her duties, national duties, tomorrow for the citizens of our lovely Federation. Once again, Dr. Osborne, thank you very much for making an extra sacrifice, especially today when you had such a hectic day. And we are hoping that our next session, 2 weeks from now, you would also be as informative and instructive as usual, and I'm proud of you. Once again, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar Soda 90.3 for Fear No Favor.
Where is the cancer man who run come out for war?
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to SugarCityFMSakeits.com or download Simple Radio app on the Google Play Store. And join Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your call.
And I'm about to make you a chance to lay the crown on. Look what you do.
nor favor. Every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM. Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar City 90.3 for Fear No Favor.
Where is man? Where is the cancer man? No runner come out for war.
Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to SugarCityFMSakeits.com or download Simple Radio app from the Google Play Store. And join Newrish Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your call. Fear nor favor. Every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM.
Welcome back to Fear Nor Favor. Our first segment would have been completed with our surgeon, General Surgeon, Dr. Natalie Osborne. I think that session was extremely informative. And whenever we have a session of this nature, it is key for you to listen to the symptoms as the good doctor have them listed and explained, because this is what would get you to present yourself for screening and establishing one way or the other what you ought to do going forward. I think that we have this information on our Facebook, YouTube, and various apps that we have around here, and we should utilize them. Take time out, listen them very carefully, make notes, share information with family members and friends, and you have to remember to. A lot of time we are talking about certain cancers or other diseases. It has a lot to do with family history. And we do not have a culture of understanding other family members, what they would have been through, maybe even why they died from whatever they died from. And we need to get closer to each other, because that history can cause you to get your life prolonged if you get early detection. But if you do not have any idea that a particular ailment or disease would have impacted members of your family, then you might not be able to give the doctor the most valuable pieces of information that would assist in expediting the process of screening and making decisions thereafter. So it is good, especially in these times. Yes, our life expectancy would have gone up to about 73, to the extent where there is contemplation as to whether or not the retirement age should go up to 63, 65. And we have to examine the type of population we have. Is our population becoming a bit older? Are we underpopulated? I heard a statement like that made on a particular registration program today. And we have to ask ourselves if we are truly underpopulated. And if you're underpopulated with respect to what? I know one time when we had people cutting cane, we couldn't get sufficient people to cut the cane, so we had to bring in people from various other countries. Now, are we underpopulated? And even if we are underpopulated, should we encourage people to come to our shores the incorrect way? Because for you to travel, you have to get documents. In order to get those documents, you would have to indicate whether or not there is a negative police record. If you have people coming here with no such documents, how do you know that one or two of those persons may not have a police record or might have a police record? We have to be careful. People come from different places, and gang-related activities are in various Caribbean countries. And if we are bringing in people from different countries, we must be aware that we are accustomed to certain things happening here. Luckily, our guys who once war against themselves, they're now at peace. But even if that was not the case, we ought to be able to distinguish a particular type of violence or crime or antisocial behavior that is very much unlike what we are accustomed of. And that would give us an indication of where it might have come from. So we just cannot allow people to come. If we had persons on that boat, or whether or not it was one or two, we have to ask ourselves some very, very serious questions. Are we in a position to facilitate that? What would we be facilitating? Somebody, maybe after dropping them off here, maybe everything goes favorably to them, and then the captains return to their original destination and collect tens of thousands because they would have succeeded in maybe trafficking these people. It might not appear like that on the surface. And what happened is that whatever going on in Haiti right now, people are appealing to persons' emotions. Yes, we'll have to consider emotions, but we'll have to put them aside as well and get down into the crux of the matter. Why this is taking place? If you have money to go shopping, well, you haven't been able to reach your shopping destination or whatever you wanted to buy in St. Martin or elsewhere. We have quite a bit of that selling here too. Would you mind doing some shopping around, spend some of your money with us, and then you head back on your boat to wherever you would have come from? Because your intention would have had to be the same, to go St. Martin to shop and come back, if it was genuine. So therefore, since you happen to drop short, and we have quite a variety of stuff here that you can purchase, you can ask for discounts. You can go to the various supermarkets or places of business and ask for a discount, giving them the plight of your country and the little that you have. Something might cost 27 US, and you might ask if they can give you for 19, 20, 21. Ask for discount. But the initial thing doesn't sound right. and I don't believe anybody in any profession should be pushing us to accept, because after 15 is 30, then 45, then 60, then 75, then 90, then 105. And it goes up incrementally by the 15s, because it seems as if the capacity of these boats would be around 15. So it would go up all the time. This is not the first time we're having these things happening around here. And we cannot afford. People around here are craving, screaming to have livable wages instead of minimum wages. People are asking to have livable wages. When you dilute that effort with respect to the finance that is available to do that, then the period of time they would have to wait for a livable wage could be protracted for 5-10 years. We cannot afford to have concerns of our citizens be diluted to insignificance as a result of us overwhelmingly concerning ourselves with other people issues. Yes, we would like to help. And like I said the last time, I knew a person, an associate of mine, who came into the Federation, and he was arrested, charged, convicted for entering the Federation illegally. And he was born here in our Federation. The mode of getting here was the issue, because regardless of whether you're born here or not, there is a proper way that you have to utilize to come into the country. It must be documented, and documented in a lawful way. Now, if that could have happened to him, a national of our federation, how come nobody jumped up and said no? How come nobody jumped for him back then? But then we are jumping now for 15 persons. And we have to be careful. People like to go back and look at the history and say, yes, they were the first to do this and first to do that. And when a slave escaped and they reached Haiti, they were granted freedom. Well, all of that is okay. But the fact is, we have evolved. We have evolved. And mighty America and Canada and those places, France, are trying to put some things in place to see if they can bring back Haiti to some level of dignity for their people. And yes, we are in support of that, but we cannot take on the burden of other places. If we allow people to come, we must know who they are in the first place, and that our population would not be any further contaminated with antisocial behavior as a result of us not knowing the intricacies of these people's characteristics and attributes. We have to make a bigger effort. And I agree, if you come in a certain way, you're being given a few months to get things in order. But if you come because you had money to go shopping and your vessel broke down and the vessel is put back into conditions it was in before the incident, then what would stop you from going back? You did not leave. If you did not leave to get asylum somewhere, how come all of a sudden you have this automatic transition of seeking asylum put as part of the equation? And we have people still out of jobs from COVID, the impact of COVID, who suffer the wrath of COVID. And we have to try to look after them. Because if we continue to take in people and we do not have that cushion to facilitate them, we would be forced now to increase our social nettings. And as such, taxes might have to be introduced to facilitate increase in those social nets that we are trying to make sure that people do not fall through. But come on, we have to use wisdom, man. Wisdom. We cannot put a whole populace at stake because we want to show that we can take a fight to the legal system. We can't. Who are these people? We don't even know if you have a teacher, a plumber, a technical person, a nurse, a doctor. Nobody's speaking to the composition of the 15 persons. And maybe the reason they're not talking to the composition is because they do not know. How dangerous could it be for you to have a composition not known or unknown to a destination where these people are traveling? The mighty America is in a better position than we are to facilitate certain things. Why the international conventions that we acceded and ratified to, why they don't put out a hand and say, well, you think it's can't afford to facilitate them? Could they be taken to the US, Canada, France? You know, they have much more than we have here, whatever little we have. It is to be shared amongst us so that people are as comfortable as they can be. We're not supposed to be in this predicament. You have persons still awaiting severance pay from jobs that they carried out for a long time. We still have persons who would like to get an increase in their salaries. We're still experiencing imported inflation. I mean, prices going up and up and up and up. So when these people need stuff from the supermarket, since they, for the time being, would be jobless, I can't even say moneyless because it is indicated that they left to go shopping in St. Martin. When they need things, our government would have to provide for them. Once they're in our custody, they have to be provided for. Taxpayers' money would have to be used to provide for them in the interim. If, on the other hand, you have persons who are willing to take in one, you have about 15 families or something like that taking in one each, and they can become a part of the federation in that way. But then it is still a burden because we have persons here still seeking jobs. And you have persons here who have jobs seeking better paying jobs. How can we deal with this from a humanitarian but at least a sensible way? We need to do things differently. We have antisocial behavior. How do we differentiate after we'd have had this melting pot of persons from all over the place? We have other persons here illegally. I mean, the immigration department already has a lot of work to do. We should know, and I always would say, we should have records of the number of Trinidadians, Jamaicans, Bajans, Italians, wherever people came from. We must have records of that. The record must also reflect the conditions that were placed on each individual that is here who is not a citizen of St. Kitts Nevis. Peter came in December 2022. Peter should have gone back out the end of February. Is there any manifestation to indicate that Peter left the Federation the 28th of February? If he did not, where he is, could he give us a reason why he wasn't able to go? You know, these are things that we need to know for every single person who is here, who intended to visit the first instance and then maybe spread over and get whatever else. But we need to do a deep, deep reflux of persons who are here, do some purging, and let us feel comfortable that XYZ is the case. Our immigration department should be actively involved in getting those figures together and explanations be given. There must be a website where we can go and see the composition of persons who are visiting. Not only that, but even those who are here legally on a permanent basis. You see, something Peter working at ECCB, yes, somebody that working as a technician somewhere. We must know. This is our little private space. And the more persons come into this private space unaccounted for in such an intrusive manner, we're losing grip. We're losing the grip on our country. Politicians should do what they have to do. As a politician, things would happen. You're going to lose some support, you're going to gain some. Re-electability or electability must not always be the main thing. You have to look for your country. Sometimes you might end up with a lot of enemy, but end up in a better position and be more re-electable than you would have thought. When you think that people getting vexed with you, there are others who are rejoicing that you would have taken certain steps. And my thing is this: be very careful in allowing people to come to our country to put extra pressure on the people who are here already and deserve better and are craving and screaming for better through the policies and decisions of those that we put at the helm and entrusted our confidence. On that note, we have come to the end of our session for tonight, and I would like to thank those of you who listen, those of you who watch via social media, and we are hoping to continue to have our informative, instructive programs on Thursdays from 8 to 10 on Sugar City 90.3. Thank you.
Fellow citizens, near and
Opinions and
far.
statements made by the host and participants in this program are not those of the owners, advertisers,